It's usually at this point of the conversation, when everything is run out, they say, well, you can't prove it's true, but that's why you're supposed to have faith. In that moment, it has nothing to do with behavior. Faith becomes a placeholder for certainty. It's just a shield to protect their identity. Everybody is using faith to get to a whole bunch of crazy and contradictory claims. Ideas that feel inherently wise, that make religions draw people in and feel compelling. Faith for a society looks like everyone acting as though they have the power to make their future better for themselves and for their children. Coming to you live from Uber Studios, it's your host, Uber Mormon. How's everybody doing? This is the show where we go digging through the Mormon toolbox and we see if anything in there still actually works. And today we're talking about faith. Before we go any further, it's important to point out that the word faith gets used at least two very different ways, especially in Mormonism. One version treats faith like a strategy, acting as if something is true in order to test it and see what results it produces. That's the kind of faith that I want to talk about today. That's the kind of faith that I taught as a missionary. Faith is a principle of action. The other version is more of a placeholder for certainty. When evidence starts to feel shaky, people will say, that's why you need faith. In that moment, faith becomes a kind of shield, something that protects their identity more than it helps them understand or seek the truth. The dictionary says that faith is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. And I would add that genuine trust nearly always compels action.
I will accept your premise wholesale that religion is good, maybe even necessary for society. What do you want me to do if I just don't think it's true? Am I just lie to my children, raise them believing something that I don't believe is the case? Sure, you can act as if God exists, and that's what someone like Peterson says that people do already, but ultimately, when push comes to shove and you really have to make a moral sacrifice, if you're not actually a Christian, you're probably not going to do the actually Christian thing.
I've been thinking a lot recently about stuff that is figuratively true but literally false.
It's a bit like the gun is always loaded. It's not true that the gun is always loaded, but we're just going to pretend that it is. And that's much better, at least to a good society, if we always
literally
act like
false but figuratively true.
But you can't actually act like it's true. Like if you ask me to put money on like opening the gun and seeing if there's a bullet.
So this only works in low stakes situations.
Exactly.
Using the acting as if the gun is loaded thing, you do not point it at anybody, you do not leave it around the children. If a robber breaks into your house, you don't go downstairs with said gun acting as if it's loaded.
Exactly right.
If you truly have faith in something, you behave as though it matters. In secular contexts, faith usually means a willingness to act without full certainty, especially when the outcome depends on things that are outside of your control. Faith for a society looks like everyone acting as though they have the power to make their future better for themselves and for their children. When I talk about faith in this video, I'm talking about this kind. The one that functions as a social strategy and a cultural technology. The kind that shaped our behaviors and helped societies outcompete others. Because it's ideas like this, ideas that feel inherently wise and undeniably productive, that make religions draw people in and feel compelling. Maybe not true, but true enough to hook us. Religion in this sense isn't just a belief. It's an emergent social technology as well. Not because somebody sat down and designed it, but because a community is inherently living out a social playbook. By default, every group is operating by a system, and over time, those systems refine themselves, much like evolution refines the characteristics of an animal or an organism. Communities that stumbled into belief systems that promoted cooperation, sacrifice, delayed gratification, tended to survive and outperform those that didn't. They passed these behaviors and the stories that carried them onto the next generation. And stories are another social technology here. They encode and transmit behaviors that lead to success. You can see productive lessons that are wrapped up in stories that are passed down in examples like the parable of the talents from the New Testament. A master gives 3 servants different amounts of money before leaving on a journey. 2 of them invest, and they double what they were given. The third buries his in the ground out of fear of loss. And when the master returns, he praises the first 2. He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and he gives them more responsibility, which is kind of fulfilling the prophecy that Jesus says, where he says, "To those who have much, more will be given." The third one gets punished, not because he failed, but because he didn't even try. The story rewards long-term thinking, risk, and action rooted in belief. That's not just a moral lesson, it's a behavioral nudge that's useful for society. It's useful for society if there are a lot of people who feel that way and act that way. Our cultural stories are our software. They help us categorize what we perceive, run it through an environmental filter, and then output behavior that benefits society. Since humans are primarily social creatures, and by that I mean our survival has always depended more on group cohesion than individual strength, it might not make sense to evaluate faith on the individual level. Maybe faith isn't just a personal virtue or a private experience. Maybe it's a feature that gave evolutionary advantages to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. This trait would have made communities more stable, more cooperative, and better equipped to navigate the uncertainty of life. In that light, faith becomes less about what you believe and more about how your beliefs shape the behaviors of the group, and those behaviors will help your group survive. When I was a missionary, we taught that faith isn't just a feeling. We always said faith is a verb. Faith without works is dead. You show your faith by keeping the commandments, by acting as if God will bless you for keeping the commandments. That was the formula. Act like it matters if you don't have proof yet. Do the thing, the spiritual confirmation will come later. It wasn't about proving that the church was true. It was about acting if it already was and letting the results unfold over time. Boo, it's me. Remember me? I want to hone in on something that I didn't make clear in the first draft, and as I'm editing it, I'm noticing it here, and I just want to hammer this home because this is kind of the crux of the whole video here. The version of faith that I just described, the version of faith that I taught as a missionary, is so close to the secular definition that I gave earlier. Some of you might be thinking, that's the same thing. Why are you making a distinction here? Or how is that any different than what you were saying earlier? The only difference between the secular version that I gave earlier and the version that I gave as a missionary is that the missionary version of faith has one component added to it that the other does not. And it's that faith could help you arrive at a conclusion that is true. That's the difference. Faith is a means of testing something to get a truth output. Now, I'm working on a video as we speak that's separate from this video that goes into how the actual problem with Mormonism and the actual problem with organized religions is that our modern concept of religion puts them somewhere on a spectrum of true and false, and somehow every religion fits onto somewhere on the line of more true or less true than another religion. And I know that some of you will watch that part and be like, I'm actually smart. They're all false. It's not even that they're all false. It's that true and false isn't the scale that they're supposed to be on. Anyway, that's another video, and it'll come out when it comes out. But this is the analogy that I want to use for faith. You are a car in Google Maps, okay? Now, we're going to use Paul Tillich's definition of religion, and we are going to say that religion is the thing that for you is of ultimate concern. Okay, so religion is the place that you want to direct your life toward. Now, Tillich remarks, and he's brilliant for remarking this, that it would be impossible for a person to not have something that to them matters more than anything else. Even if you only have 5 things that matter to you and they're relatively of low importance, even in your opinion, one of those things will be more important than the rest of those things, simply by math. And so definitionally for Tillich, religion is the thing of ultimate concern for you. Now, some people could have the ultimate concern that they have no ultimate concerns. Some people could stand on that hill and die on that hill so hard that that hill becomes, ironically, the proof that they're wrong. That's just to clarify the point, that the thing that I'm using here, the destination on the map that you are navigating toward, is by definition religion for you. Okay, so we're now stepping outside of Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and all of that. That's not religion. That's our modern concept of religion. You are in a car, and that car is headed toward your religion. You're building your life so that it takes you to heaven on earth. Faith, in this analogy, is fuel. It is the gas that you put in your car. And this is where very smart theists can get this point turned around. The amount of fuel that you need, or the type of fuel that you need, has no correlation to you getting to the correct place. Putting gas in your car, in a sense, guarantees that you get there, but it only guarantees that you get there in the same way that it guarantees that you could get anywhere. It only makes the car able to move. It doesn't guarantee that you arrive at the destination that Google Maps is sending you to. And so I want to make that abundantly clear here, and I have now said abundantly clear like 7 times, so you know I'm being serious. Anyway, do a supercut now of all the times I said abundantly clear. Or don't. Leave it in, cut it out, I don't care. I'm now, this is what's interesting, I'm now directing to my future self what will happen, but then my future self will do something else. So isn't that fun? And you could even make the argument from the theist perspective that, well, sure, maybe gas in the tank doesn't guarantee that I navigate somewhere and I get to the precise destination, but I definitely couldn't get to the correct destination if I didn't have any fuel at all. And that's where they're right. And so it's so tricky. The point still stands. You could drive anywhere with that gas tank. You could do a U-turn and drive the other direction. And that's what religious people are doing. That's the way that they are all using their faith. I can't tell you the number of street epistemology videos that I have watched where people are defending different claims and different religions. And when it all comes down to, they realize that they don't actually know, and they can't actually make an eloquent or logical case for why their belief is true, they fall back on, well, that's why you need to have faith. Everybody is using faith to get themselves to a whole bunch of crazy and contradictory claims. My judgment of faith as a social strategy here is not to say you have the power within you to make your future better. I don't actually know if you have that, but I know that if you think that you have that, that would be an incredibly useful way for you to see yourself in the world. And that's the role that faith is playing here. I often see faith used in a very different way. I'll be in a deep conversation with a friend, and I'll be asking them how they concluded that the church was true. And often we will reach a point, not to brag, where they kind of realize that the reasons aren't as solid as they thought they were. Maybe they wouldn't find those same reasons convincing if a different person from a different religion were saying, this is why you should join my religion. It's usually at this point of the conversation, when everything is run out, they say, well, you can't prove it's true, but that's why you're supposed to have faith. In that moment, it has nothing to do with behavior. Faith becomes a placeholder for certainty. It's no longer a strategy. It's just a shield to protect their identity. Faith in that moment becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The act of believing reinforces the belief itself. Kind of like that famous quote, if you don't have a testimony, bear it, or something along those lines. We're invited to continue to act as if we already think it's true. even if we haven't arrived at that conclusion for ourselves, because the act of saying that I know it's true creates emotional strength in your own belief. And this is not the kind of faith that I'm talking about. I'm talking about a faith that teaches us to say, my actions matter. My sacrifices today can lead to a better tomorrow. If we talk about game theory for a minute, I think it helps bring together what I keep mentioning about social strategy. Game theory was discovered or invented, however you want to say it, by a man named Robert Axelrod in the 80s. He wrote a book called The Evolution of Cooperation. It's a great book. You should all look into it. You should read it. The question on Axelrod's mind was, if it seems like you get further in life by just stabbing everybody in the back and taking advantage of them, but why has cooperation emerged the way that it has? And so what he did, he was an economist, he had a bunch of people who knew how to write code, put together a strategy or a computer program that would play Prisoner's Dilemma against each other, against other computer programs. In round one, they could either stab the other person in the back, defect, or cooperate with them. If they both cooperated, they both get 3 points. If one cooperates and one defects, then the one who defected gets 5 points and the one who cooperated gets 0 points. And if they both defect, they both get 0 points. He wanted to run a bunch of tests and see what type of person-to-person behavior would be the most beneficial for that person. What type of strategy would leave you with the most points at the end of your life? Now, there was something that he noticed. He did this twice, and there was something that he noticed that was really interesting between the first time and the second time. The first time, there were 100 rounds. So on round 100, guess what everybody did? Everybody defected. Because if you're playing a game and you know that this is now going to be the last time that you see somebody, then there's no more treasures in heaven with them. It all ends now. And so you can kind of let it die however it's going to die. If in the second round, he made it an unsure number of rounds. So it could be 100, it could be 150. Nobody knew that going into it. And that's something interesting that religion does. Religion makes it so that there is an amount of time after your life where you don't know how long the game is still going. And so you have to be on your best behavior. That's kind of fascinating to me. But the strategy that won everything, and I've done this in a video called the Jesus strategy. It's on my channel. The strategy that won was called tit for tat. You start by being nice. You start by cooperating. And then you mirror the other person's energy 100%. If they cooperate with you, you cooperate with them in the next round. If they defect against you, you defect against them in the next round. But then you forgive them. You don't defect, and from then on you're defecting for the rest of the game. You only defect as many times as they defect as a consequence for their defection. Axelrod, in an interview, I'll try and find the clip, said that there were nice strategies and there were mean strategies, and there were forgiving strategies and there were not so forgiving strategies. And he found it interesting when he took the attributes of tit for tat and he laid them out on paper. It sounded like he was describing God. When I say God, I'm not talking about a literal being. I'm talking about the personification of game theory. The idea that if we all act like our choices have long-term consequences, we create better systems. It's a symbolic stand-in for the embodied collective wisdom that encourages pro-social behavior over time. It's easier for us as humans to interact with reality itself if we can personify it. So we wrap this idea into a character so that we can relate to it. We can talk to it. We can fear it. We can feel like it sees us and loves us. That personification is functional. It packages long-term wisdom into something that humans can emotionally bond with. It translates abstract systems into something that feels like a relationship with reality, making generational behavior easier to adopt, tell stories about, and pass on. Faith says Act like the future matters even when it's hard, even when the payoff is far away. And over time, that strategy will beat the alternatives. It builds trust. It makes planning possible. It allows for compound growth, financially, socially, and spiritually. And so it survives. The very act of believing in a better future inspires us to create one. Imagine a bunch of basketball teams in a league. One of them operates on faith, not religious faith, but the belief that hard work, discipline, and teamwork will lead to success. Over time, that team would consistently outperform a team that believed that nothing mattered, just have fun, winning isn't important, the scoreboard is fake anyway, numbers don't even exist, and the reflecting lights that show the numbers are really just electrical pulses. Technically, they're right. That's true. The numbers don't exist. Those lights flickering on the screen really are just electrical signals. We've all agreed to treat this as meaningful, though. And so it is. That's the shared belief. It shapes behavior. It gives structure. It makes the game matter. And in the same way, faith becomes real because we act like it is. Go back to how cultural stories direct our perception. In a basketball game, there are lots of stories going on. There's the game itself. Numbers aren't real. The scoreboard is an agreed upon fiction. The rules are arbitrary. In basketball, maybe the stakes are low. But the progress of human society, or small hunter-gatherer groups, this is life or death. We need to focus and make sure that we're playing the right game. And these stories direct our attention on which game is the correct one to be playing. When people are playing any game that they play socially, and now social game could mean your neighbors. Literally, you are being neighbors. That's the game. Social game could be the way that you interact with a coworker. I'm about to coach my son's soccer team. I'm now going to be playing the game of coach with all those parents. Every social interaction is actually a game. And the strategy is start by being nice, and then I will match their energy. So when I say there are so many things going on within the game, it reminds me of a quote from Sherlock Holmes. In the book, Watson finds out that Sherlock did not know that the sun was the center of the universe. Sherlock thought that the earth was, and he's kind of giving him a hard time because Sherlock is this brilliant genius guy and he doesn't even know that the sun is in the middle. And Sherlock's response is, what does it matter to me if the moon is in the middle? It doesn't change anything about what I do here, solving mysteries. That's what I mean about all these facts going on in the basketball game, is that, yeah, there are so many different games going on. There are even like the emotional things going on between the players. Maybe some of them don't get along. Maybe they're trying to balance that out. Maybe there are people in the stand who are paid to come from colleges and watch certain players. And so while players need to work within the team to, have cohesion and stick to the game plan, they also need to shine a little bit so that maybe they could go to college. So that's why I'm saying there's so many games going on in a given scenario. There's so many facts that are true. And so we have to ask ourselves sometime, what facts are the most relevant? And when I said earlier that our cultural stories are our software, they're directing our attention at the facts that are most relevant to us at that time. A fact that will always be near the top is group cohesion and cooperation. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors did not matter so much if the earth went around the sun or if the sun went around the earth. They mattered if, when I share this mammoth with you, are you going to share your mammoth with me the next time? And that's what I mean by social strategy. It's not hard to imagine why these traits, trust, sacrifice, cooperation, long-term thinking, are evolutionarily productive. But the thing is, we can't put these things inside of our DNA and give them to our children. They need to be transmitted through myths and stories. That's why faith gets baked into successful societies. It's not about belief, it's about behavior. And behavior is the language of evolution. Evolution doesn't hear words. It doesn't care about intentions. It selects for actions that lead to survival and replication. That's why the New Testament had Jesus say, by their fruits ye shall know them. Wisdom only survives if it's embodied. Thought experiment here. If I had to start a civilization today with a random sample of people, and I wanted them to value trust and sacrifice and cooperation and long-term growth and all the things that we've talked about so far, I probably wouldn't just give them a lecture on evolutionary psychology. I think I would need a myth. I think I would need a story with high stakes, something that ties their actions to blessings now and ties their future actions to bigger blessings later. Something like heaven and hell. If you obey, you can be with your family forever. Something like if you embody these traits that are inherently productive for society and will make us grow, you'll also have more later. The bigger reward that people are offered later, the more likely we can control their behavior now. And Jesus has that line where he says, set aside treasures now, where the moth corrupts and all of that. Build up for yourself instead treasures in heaven. Now, some people have said that treasures in heaven is your reputation, how people see you. It's incredibly pro-social. Act as though every interaction that you have with somebody is the starting point for a blossoming relationship that will be mutually beneficial. You don't have to believe in the supernatural to see why faith has stuck around. It's not perfect. It's not always even good, and it does not help us arrive at true conclusions. It's an undeniably effective social strategy. And if we want a future that's better than our past, then we still need to believe that we can act to make it happen. And here's the crazy part. It doesn't even matter if we can act to make it happen. It just matters that we believe that we can act to make it happen. Now, this ties into my views on free will, and I'm not going to get into that right now because I talked about that in a video, and I'm pretty sure I did, and I'm going to put it here. But to be clear, anyone who says religion only ever offers negative things are not being intellectually honest. While I don't personally see Mormonism as a system that has added any sort of lasting benefit to my life, and believe me, if I thought that it was a system that could do that, I would be there. But I am understanding why it works for others. It's capable of producing meaning, belonging, a moral structure, and resilience. Thank you for watching. If you like this, if you're more interested in sticking around and furthering the conversation, if you see glaring holes in my argument, put it in the comments, hit subscribe, hit all the YouTube things that YouTube tells you to do. Thank you for watching. I will see you all another time. Peace.